Hello everybody, welcome back to the Spiritual Victories channel. Hope you're keeping well. Yeah, it's pretty hot this week here in the UK. We've had like a mega heat wave. It's still quite hot outside today, to be fair. You know, last night it was difficult to sleep. It was just ridiculous, you know. For the UK, the thing is we're not used to these temperatures, so you know, whilst I've lived abroad, you know, in Spain and different Greece and different places, a lot of places don't have aircon. You know, in the UK, I'm talking about homes and apartments and stuff, unless it's a holiday rental. So the net result is that a lot of people are, you know, feeling a bit hot at night and stuff. So it's going to be hot again tomorrow, and hopefully, you know, over the weekend it should start to subside a little bit. Okay, so little intro done for today's video, or this week's video. What I thought I would do is talk to you about some, you know, stuff around Psalm 118 and how, you know, we should be trusting God instead of trying to do everything ourselves. We've all fallen into that trap, you know, myself included, where we're, you know, trying to build a digital profile, maintain a digital profile. That's slightly different for me because I do work in the kind of digital marketing sphere, digital marketing space. You know, I have like another channel that's like 10,000 subscribers and growing, and that's like kind of does like, you know, marketing, mini marketing vlogs, some kind of travel tech, technology, SaaS marketing, all that kind of stuff, and you know, gradually introducing various aspects of, you know, luxury travel and stuff into it, but that's for the future. So, you know, that's a little bit about me. Look, let's crack on with this. So we've become so reliant on, you know, I mentioned some of this in the other video, it's not a like for like video, you know, it's going to be a bit different. So let's talk about Psalm 118. You know, the Psalm, I'm going to put the Psalm in the description for you so you can have a read through. Now, people have got different interpretations of this. Some people might think it's a bit of ancient literacy, a nice bit of ancient poetry, or something that people wrote in their spare time or whatever. But it's, you know, the bottom line is, from a Christian perspective, it's one of the biblical scriptures. Now, you know, the psalmist acknowledges divine discipline in the psalm, but you know, it also acknowledges ultimate victory. You know, now, whilst, as I mentioned, whilst some people might see it as a bit of airy-fairy, you know, poetry and a nice bit of gracious writing and stuff, you know, these scriptures are mentioned in the New Testament specifically a number of times, and I'll put that in the video description as well. With these psalms, you know, perhaps a lot of people don't realise it, but they can become like a living reality for, you know, a number of people. And if we just trust God, you know, some of the things which we're, you know, trying to make happen, don't have any luck with, you know, we can have success just by showing humility. And biblical humility means just, you know, trusting in God's divine power rather than trying to, you know, push that stone ourselves up the hill or whatever it might be. You know, God's kind of divine power, supernatural power, spiritual power, whatever you're more comfortable with in terms of terminology, is so much greater than anything we can achieve. I mean, just by way of example, I remember 30 years ago, my finances were broken. You know, I barely had one bank account. And, you know, now I've got 3 or 4, all top tier banks. You know, one's a business account. You know, they're all top banks and stuff. So look, you know, God can heal these things in a way which we can't. You know, likewise with employment. I mean, you know, once upon a time we used to find it impossible to get a job. Nowadays that's not the case. Like I say, I do like digital freelancing, videography, and some kind of contract work and stuff. But you know, things evolve. You know, if we just trust God, you know, He can, you know, make a difference in our lives in perhaps a way which we can't, if that makes sense. So I have got some stuff in front of me as per usual. Let's just bring it up. Got too many windows open. I did have some, oh, here it is, yeah. Always got too many windows open me. I'll read out what it says here and I'll talk to you on camera again in a second. So it says, the paradox of presence. Analyse the psychological exhaustion of maintaining a 2026 digital identity where visibility is equated with worth. But you see this a lot, especially with like the influencers and stuff, you know, the more subscribers and more followers they've got, you know, in the kind of worldly view, that's perceived as, you know, more valuable than somebody with, like, say, 10 subscribers. But that's not really the case, but that's just the metric that the world uses, you know. So contrast the relentless demand for self-optimization. Yeah, tell me about it. I mean, like, you see it in the workplace, you see it in the you know, down the pub or socially among your friends. You know, everyone's trying to elevate themselves into a position of prestige, whoever got, you know, the best job title and the best car. And, you know, some of my neighbours are like that. You know, they've got brand new cars on the drive, and, you know, to be honest, you know, both the neighbours across the road, you know, not that they'll ever see this video, but, you know, they've got brand new cars, you know, £30,000 each, you know, I just question whether it's really necessary when you can have a perfectly good car for like sort of £4,000 or £5,000. I mean, mine didn't cost, you know, £30,000. It's great, you know. So, you know, some of these things are status symbols where people try and get these things because they think they're further ahead. But if you don't have that kind of corrected relationship with God, where God forgives your sin and that you believe that Jesus died on the cross, then, you know, especially from a Christian perspective, you know, you're probably in a worse position, because, you know, everyone passes away. I mean, all I have to do is scroll through LinkedIn about all these high-flying executives who, you know, have held these positions of grandeur, these grand jobs, you know, whether multi-site operations, multi-million-pound companies, and then the colleagues are posting, you know, we will miss you, or rest in peace, or whatever. So like, everyone passes away. So what I'm saying to you is just try and, you know, while you're alive in the body, try and reconnect with God, try and find that quiet time, show humility. You know, a lot, as I said, you know, all this pride, you know, comes from, you know, the former Lucifer, stroke Satan, who was thrown out of heaven, cast down to earth. You know, that's where it all originates from. You know, so it's sinful. You know, there's a difference between, you know, perhaps somebody who goes to work and takes, you know, some pride and, you know, in their workmanship and the quality of their work and stuff, to kind of outright pride, you know, where people think they're better than the next person because of their car, because of their house, because of their job, because of their clothes, because of their communication skills, or whatever, their money, or whatever it might be, or a number of those things combined. And it's very real. You know, a lot of people have that issue where they're kind of so hung up and they believe that they were born to rule and stuff, but all that pride comes from Satan. It's not from God. You know, that's what I'm saying. So if we can humble ourselves and just, you know, bring ourselves back down to earth, a good position to adopt is, you know, just remind yourself of the cross. You know, Jesus on the cross. You know, in fact, he died to pay the price for our sins, like all of our sins. You know, and that's a good way to kind of just come back to a position of humility. There's a huge subject with this. I could go on and on, you know, literally. So, look, with regard to like Psalm 118, the reason the Psalm exists is because God uses it in people's lives. He used it in mine. I mean, I had a number of experiences a number of years ago. You know, maybe not 30 years ago. Maybe some within the last 5 years. You know, and it's God's way of, you know, correcting. If you think of like a parent who corrects a son or a daughter, in the same way God corrects those he accepts as his sons or his children, let's say in a spiritual context. So the discipline that's mentioned in Psalm 118, it's not, whilst it is punitive in some respects, it's not about destruction, annihilation. It's about refinement and bringing, you know, remolding, reshaping that person so that they become a bit more aligned with God and think in a bit more of a way which, you know, God does or is acceptable to God. And it's about strengthening that person's faith. So the psalm does end in victory, you know, so I'll just appeal to you, you know, if you see somebody in life, whoever it is, you know, things aren't going well, you know, don't judge, you know, because, you know, never judge a book by its cover, because you have to look beneath the beneath the cover about what's really going on. It's easy to think that that person's committed XYZ sins, or they've been held responsible for sins in the past, and I accept that people do get punished for sin. I accept that. It's mentioned in the Bible as well, funnily enough. But with regard to like Psalm 118, it's a psalm of ultimate victory, where all the enemies of that person will be subdued. And when it mentions the cornerstone, in Psalm 118, that's widely referred to as, or accepted as, being sort of Israel or Jesus or whatever. So look, I'm going to put it in the description with a bit of additional context as well. Just bear in mind that the psalm, whilst it does, there's 2 points really. Whilst it's a psalm of divine correction, it ends in ultimate spiritual victory, compared to people who haven't gone through that discipline. And also, these things can become like a living reality. It's not just about, whilst obviously it's about Jesus, obviously, but what I'm saying is everyday believers in the Christian faith, who've tripped over this kind of stone that's set in Zion, that's mentioned in the New Testament, it can play out in a number of different ways. I mean, like I say, I could go on and on about what happened to me, and perhaps I'll do that in some other videos. I need to be careful not to make the videos too heavy, because what happened to me was quite heavy, and I want to make it kind of informative, appealing, add some context to it, rather than going too deep, too heavy, too soon. So look, I'll leave it there. I'll put the stuff in the description. Do have a read through the psalm. I'd love to know what you think about it. Feel free to write your comments in the below in the comments section. Like and share the video, and if you're not a subscriber already, please do consider subscribing, because it's these subscribers who help to build up the channel, and help myself and people around the channel to continue to develop it and build it up and stuff. So I'll shut up. I'll leave it there. Thank you for listening. I don't want to make the video too long, and I'll hopefully see you on the next one. So take care, and I'll see you soon.